Good. Hello, and welcome to Visual AI. And in my session, I want to chat a little bit about just how do you actually critique art, because this can be a sort of daunting thing if it's something you haven't done before. And also, how do we do a little bit of exploration with AI in our visual world? So, we're going to take a look at both of those. My name is Cookie Redding. I am a professor through the School of Visual Arts and the World Campus, where I teach through the digital art program and the DMD program, which is design and multimedia. So AI and art is pretty commonplace in my realm. But let's look at how to actually talk about art. So one of the trickier things is just knowing the vocab to start with. And in art, we have the elements of art and the principles of design. And these two will combine, and it's going to give you the vocab that you need to discuss a work. Now, painting might only have one or two of these to be dealing with, and one might have all of them that it's dealing with. It's going to depend on what the artist was trying to convey and what you, as the viewer, are trying to interpret. So, one thing I like to think of is once the art is released into the wild, so to speak. So, when an artist puts it up on display on Instagram, in the wild at a gallery, it becomes more of a public experience versus just that experience with the artist in their studio. So the interpretations are varied. It can be, commonplace to anything under the sun. So it's all up to you and how you look at the piece and are interpreting it. So our elements of art are line, shape, form, color, space, texture, and value. And what I'm going to do is just sort of bounce through each of those quickly so that you can get an idea of what to look for when you are looking at a piece of art. And then I also created a sort of critique guideline form so that when you are looking at a piece, you're able to break it up into these elements and then the principles. But the most basic one is line. So line, if you're a math major, you know this one is from point to point. So it could be, a nice straight path. It could be a meandering and varied moving point on that line. So it can take any form along the way on that canvas. So as an element of art, it's going to pertain to the various marks, outlines, implied lines. The line doesn't even have to exist. And so these implied lines in art and design most often are going to be used to shape the actual two-dimensional piece. It's going to have thickness, it's going to have direction, and it's going to have length. Some words that you can use to describe these. I'm just going to slide this down so we can see all of these slides. This is just the basis. You can use any word under the sun. Thick, thin, long, short, vertical, horizontal, zigzag. And you see a lot of these are from our math land. So whenever I hear people say art and math don't go together, well, they kind of do. They're part of our descriptors. We might not be solving a solution, but we're using the terminology to dissect something. Perpendicular, parallel, spiral, broken, wavy, curly, curved, diagonal, tapered, straight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of these could be words that if you look at a piece that someone has created in class and you're asked to critique, you can say the intersecting geometric crosshatched line makes me feel XYZ. So what I like to do in critique is I start with an element or a principle, I describe it, and then I move into the more emotive side of things. You could also use other words. These are the more, adjective based, playful, jumbled, stark, inky. So if you're using ink, it might be an inky line, which seems rather logical perhaps, but it's a really free and expressive style of a line. Mechanical would be the opposite of that. You're not going to be free and expressive. It's going to be rather rigorous and, geometric in its approach. So any of these words would work. You will have access to this PowerPoint so you can refer back to this. So you can use any other word that comes to mind when you're looking at it. Shape, let's slide this back up again. Pertains to the areas of that two-dimensional space that can be defined by edges. So it's going to set one flat specific space apart from the other. They can be geometric, they can be organic. It could be, a very linear, rectilinear, geometric piece, or it could be a nice free flowing, it's a puddle, it's a blob, it's a flower, etc. So you can have this sort of balance between something that's really a rigid shape versus something that's more organic and expressive. What's interesting with shapes is they're going to oftentimes be defined by other elements of the art: line, shape, form, color, value, etc. Shape and form can go hand in hand because shape is our geometric, but when we add dimension to that, then you're going to have the form. You're going to be dealing with the mass. So this could be that three-dimensional space. This has weight. This is our form. Volume. So this is the term for that space inside that mass. Some of these also can be, especially in this area, the mass and the volumes, much more handy when it comes to sculptures and 3D pieces. But a lot of the times in art, you're taking a 3D object, translating it onto a 2D surface, and then turning it into something that looks three-dimensional. So you're going to have mass and volume. It's just going to be implied through your materials. And then again, geometric. So this is formed by the straight lines or the curved ones that are going to progress evenly. These are our circles, squares, triangles. And then the 3D equivalent is the cubes, boxes, pyramids, and spheres. So, you can just insert one for the other, whether it has dimension or not. Color, that's our fun one. There's a lot of science behind color. So one of the things we have to do as artists is, one, figure out some of that science, and then how do you harmonize that within your piece. So as we know, color is light reflected off of an object. It has three main characteristics when you're dealing with it in art. It's the hue, that's the red, green, blue, yellow, etc. The value, is it lighter or is it a little bit darker of a blue? And the intensity, is it a really vibrant, like you're staring at an ocean and it's a perfect weird blue? Or is it sort of like the choppy blue gray of a lake? So, which side does that swing on the intensity of it? They can be warm, it can be cool, and it just depends on what end of the color spectrum they're going to fall. Space. So real space is three-dimensional. So space in the art is actually referring to that feeling of depth in 3 dimensions. So like I said, a three-dimensional object, we draw it on a two-dimensional piece to make it look like it's three-dimensional. Space can also be the actual space. So I am painting on a 20 by 20 canvas. I am doing an 18 by 24 inch drawing on watercolor paper or what have you. So it's the actual physical space that you're working on. What we have to deal with is the primary object. So if I am standing in front of a white background, I would be considered the positive space, and the area around me is the negative space. And it's oftentimes that negative space that's what we pay attention to when we're dealing with a composition, because that's where the sort of energy and the fun stuff happens. So if I was looking at, say, a teapot, and I'll just sit up a bit, this area here of the handle is just as important as the handle itself, because it's going to define that space. So the two are going to work together. Texture. So actual texture, it's that physical, you could rub your hand over it and you could feel the bumps. Or is it going to be more of the implied, so that it looks like it should be something, but it's not? So all objects themselves have a physical texture, and then it's the artist's job to convey them in the 2 dimension. So again, how would it feel if it's touched? Is it hard, soft, round, smooth, leathery, sharp? You'll see a lot of still lifes with like metal objects, so that you can get that reflection. You can see that it's a nice smooth object versus something that's like in art history, a fur-lined robe. And it should look like fur at least. In 3-dimensional work, the actual texture could be added to the text or the tactile experience of the piece. Value. The relative lightness or darkness of the object as perceived in terms of contrast. So the light and the shadow. We sort of talked about almost akin to this with the intensity, how bright, how dark something is. So we can see value in a black and white form, or we can see value through colors also. So it just depends on light and shadow. All right, so let's put this all together. An art critique, how does this actually work? Something to keep in mind that I always talk about in my classes. There is a distinction between criticism and being critical. We want the criticism. We want something that's going to help to improve the piece. We don't want something that's like mean and snarky. So that's the critical. And if someone is critiquing your work, half of the job is also up to you to be like, is this criticism or is it critical? So if something is being critical and it doesn't seem to have something valid behind it, sometimes I just disregard that critique, the criticism. I'm looking for, say, 5 people are in the class critiquing my piece. 3 of them are being like, how's the light and value working? Do you want to boost the contrast? Those are feeling helpful, and it's something that I want to think about. If it's like, I don't like orange because I don't like orange, maybe don't worry about that one. So half of the critique process is us, the other half is them. So it's going to be a two-way street. So the process of an art critique is to help improve the work or to improve the series or body of work. So to lift up rather than to tear down. So just always sort of keep that on the back burner. Whenever you are giving advice to a piece, I like to refer to it more as feedback. So when I'm giving feedback to that piece, versus how am I reading that feedback? And I'm going to slide this around again. So just a how-to guide. Your initial impressions. So just take a moment to look at the artwork. Don't worry about those elements and principles. Look at it and just what's your immediate emotional response to it? What is going to stand out the most to you? If you're looking at a seascape, say, you could be like, oh, the sky is so cool. Great. Ooh, the boat on the water, etc. So what is standing out to you first? That's probably where we're going to start. That's going to be one of our compositional pieces that are going to help you flow through the piece. Then we're going to move into the description stage. So allow for that response, and now let's see, where is it heading? So give that objective, detailed description of the artwork. Mention the size. What medium did they use? Was it watercolor? Was it oil? Was it a photograph? In this case, AI. What are the colors, the shapes, lines, textures, any other elements that could be relevant to this? Now, remember, they don't have to all be included. This boat scene might be color, it might be line, and it might be texture, but nothing else. So let's then break it down and analyze it. How are these elements working together? How does the composition, the balance, the focal point, that boat, that first thing that we're looking at, how does it use that space? What techniques are being used? Is it something like with AI, something more cyber and futuristic, or is it something that's harkening back to, say, the Renaissance, where it looks like an old painting? And then the interpretation, which is the sort of fun part. So this is you figuring out what this means for you personally. What do you think the artist is trying to convey? What, is there something symbolic happening? Is there something cultural, historically being referred to? What sort of emotional or intellectual responses is this artwork evoking? Evaluate it. So assess this effectiveness. Is the job done? Did they do it right? If it was that moody seascape and it's neon yellow, is that the right color to have chosen for this? Does it reinforce the goals that the artist was probably setting forth? And if it wasn't, say it was neon, be like, hey, are you sure you wanted to use the neon colors here? Maybe something more in the lines of a natural palette would look good. So again, we're trying to have a conversation that is helpful and not hurtful. So just express your thoughts on the artwork's strengths and an area for improvement. If you aren't sure about this section, I usually have the rule of 3. 3 good things. There's 3 things that are really working great in this piece. And here's 3 things that you might want to consider that we're not quite sure about. Is it neon? Is the size wrong? Etc. Like what is this area to think about? Comparison, this one might not have something applicable to you when you're doing this stage, but let's say you're working with something from the Renaissance and you're thinking about, this really reminds me of something Da Vinci would do. You can compare it to Da Vinci then. So if there's something you can compare it to, great. In this case in the class, if there's not, don't quite worry about that. This is more like, if I'm trying to work in the style of a Renaissance artist, maybe I would want to go and look at Da Vinci. So this is sort of that guidepost. Go check out Da Vinci's work. Look at his colors. Look at how he used tones and his brush work, etc. That way, you have someone to go and reference and research to see how they worked. And then just your personal response. Just conclude with your overall personal response to that artwork. Reflect on the emotional and the intellectual impact it had on you and discuss why it resonated with you or it didn't. Just a spoiler alert with this. I always tell my classes, you don't have to love every piece of art out there. There are pieces that are not going to resonate with you, and that's okay. So don't worry about that. So if it doesn't resonate with you, it's best to say it hasn't connected with me because XYZ. You can still celebrate the artist, you can still celebrate the artwork and still be like, it just didn't speak to me. That's all right. There are millions of pieces of art out there. You'll find the ones that you connect to and that resonate with you. So remember, just a reminder, this is a completely subjective process. So there are multiple interpretations and multiple opinions on this, and they're all valid. Constructive criticism should be respectful and focused on the artistic elements rather than just making value judgments. Again, criticism, not critical. So this is just a nice way, again, it's like a guide to help improve the piece and or to give the artist something more to think about when they're working on the piece and then when they go back into it. All right, so now that we've covered a little bit about how to do the critiquing process, let's take a little bit of a further glimpse into the world of AI and how it can be entwined in art. So the one that I'm going to focus on for this is Midjourney because it's the one I've been spending the most time with. And one thing I've been curious about asking it is, can it learn your style, or can you get the algorithm to create and generate pieces to look like something that I would do? So from here, you can see two of my paintings. So what happens when I take these paintings, input it into the system, and have it generate some more? All right, so can we have it learn our style? This was the original artwork. It is seen right here. So what I did was went in, I took a photo of it in a nice bright light, and then I input it into Midjourney. I will try to resize these so that we can see things. And in worst case scenario, I will turn this part off so we can see it. So the first round, it did all right. Now remember, it's an algorithmic language learning model. So we have to sort of keep changing those inputs so that we can get more specific. For this one, this was just, no real guide. So it's just regenerate more of these in this style. And I kept it nice and neutral. Then I started adding some more bright, vibrant colors, loose brushwork, abstract. Then you can see it starts to take more of a shape that looks like something that I would be interested in creating. One thing that I'm finding that's interesting with this process is you can see it takes snippets of my piece and it can interpret my brushwork and textural style. So the texture on this one actually looks pretty decent. Now we're getting closer. So now we refine the language on this one a little bit more. I added color field theory, which is more what this piece is studying. And then it starts getting the shapes a little bit more accurate for it. So the learning process, the first ones aren't going to look great. And, it's just a matter of finding the words and the descriptions. Because remember, Midjourney and these AI models need pretty descriptive terminologies for it. So if you're looking for a ship in the ocean and you just say ship on the ocean, it's not going to maybe give you what you want. You could say ship on the ocean, high contrast, dark colors, moody, and then it'll start to figure out what you're looking for. And then each sort of iteration of this process, you can get it closer to what you have in your mind. So it's sort of a partnership between you and the AI to figure out what's in your head and how can it give you the output to it. So this one, it took a good 20-30 minutes to get to where I wanted it, but in the end, it starts getting pretty close to what I want. So how I view these is I view these as my thumbnails, and I can look at them and just think compositionally. So I could generate. So once I find where I like it, I could keep generating. I could do 50 generations of these if I wanted. And then I can step back. I sometimes print these out, put them in my sketchbook so that when in my studio, I can think about it. So these are like little quick sketches that are working out different compositions for me that I can then take to the studio and create a new body of work based on what I've done previously in the past. So this is something I'm really interested in. I also started a podcast on this where I talk with my AI and we have conversations about art, and it's just Oh Hello Robot. We have some on the process, we have some on the history, and some on the tech side of things, and it's bi-weekly. So if this is something you're interested in, this is an exploration on this part, more of the auditory side of things, but also the written side of things, just to see how this all functions and how you can bring all of this together to have AI and art talk together. All right, so now it's your turn. So, we learned a little about critiquing, we learned about what we can do with the process, those descriptive words to get the results that you're looking for. So we're going to make a poster. So this is time for a poster jam. I love poster jams, and it's just everyone sort of working all at the same time to create something in their vision. So we are going to, as our goal, create a poster using your AI imagery on the theme of community. So whatever this means to you. And then we can pause it on this slide whenever you're working so that you can see this. So what does community actually mean to you? Is this unity and diversity, empowering local businesses, environmental sustainability, education for all, health and wellness, et cetera, et cetera? The first part of your work time might just be like figuring out what the word community would mean to you. And the research aspect is always a good way to start an actual project. So just find out, what does that mean to you? And then you can start working on imagery based on that. So we're going to create an AI image using your AI image generators to create your main image. Then we're going to pop into Adobe Express. You can create your poster there. You can also incorporate some of the elements from Firefly. That works also. The two of those talk really well together. Arrange your elements however you see fit that you feel works best for your design and your concept. You're going to save that out as a JPEG, and then you're going to upload that for submission. So with projects, this is always what I say. I want you to relax, have fun, explore, and experiment, because this is fun. I want you to have fun with this. I want you to see what the AI can do. You could take this really seriously, or you could go all sorts of crazy with this. That is going to be totally up to you. So for the next little bit, let's go ahead and make our poster.